Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So basically last time, I think most of you guys were here, we were, oh, no, Nathaniel and I don't think Michael were. So we were going over the top priority projects and initiatives and or programs that would make the most impact in the first 5 years. So I'm gonna put that document link in the chat again, there it is. So we can start going through that. I added a second sheet onto that. I guess I can just pull that up. Oh, no, not that. Okay, can you guys see that? Yeah, okay, so I added this second tab down here so that rather than have it all, once we solidify language or start kind of adding things over, we can just put it into the second tab. So that way we can keep everything, but it'll be a little bit more organized. So I put the topics that we had on that page kind of down here. And then the ones that are unhighlighted in the first column, I just put those areas of need and they're in the order of agreement rates on from the survey in the first column, just so we can compare. So like, for example, infrastructure was first, but all of the water issues were under infrastructure in the survey. And that was pretty much one of the largest topics. So it makes sense that we go with water and then infrastructure, but just as we're kind of developing this and putting it in order for the survey, we'll have that to reference. Do you guys want to take some time to go through it first and review it separately and then kind of start going over the language again like we did last time? Yeah, okay, so last time basically we would start with a topic, read all the things, and then try to condense it into a way that makes sense on a survey. So moving all of the issues over either with a pre-facing question or just we're going to do just basically like a checklist rating option for all of the topics. That makes sense. So I guess we'll give it to like maybe 5:20 to go over it, and if we need more time we can, and then we can start working on language. Hey, Makalea.
Hey, aloha, Jen.
Hey, so we're just taking some time to kind of let people go over the top priority projects, initiatives, and programs before we get started on ironing out language again. And then I told them I did make a sheet too, where I started to transfer over what we had finalized and not finalized, but kind of like started formulating in the last meeting into the sheet too.
Awesome. Can you, I'm sure you dropped it in the chat earlier, but since I just came in, I can't see the link.
Yes, I
Do you
will
mind
share it right
sending that?
now.
Thank you.
And I'll also, you guys, I'll also put the, I have the breakdowns, the areas we need breakdowns along with the survey results in a document that I transferred. So I'll also share that too, if it's helpful to go back and refer to those specific, breakdowns of each area of need too, if that's helpful. So the first one I shared is the top priority projects, initiatives, and programs. And then the second one was the areas of need.
Did anybody tell you how amazing you are? Thank you for doing all of this. It's so much work.
My life is just work at this point, so I'm just gonna write it out and like make it fun and enjoyable.
You can rest when you mock it.
Hey, Jennifer. William just texted me. He says he's not going to make it to the meeting. He's got a bull problem in Kapalua.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Life happens. Cool problems happen.
No, I was looking at the water one.
Mhm.
We never said anything about the reuse of gray water. That would really free up so much fresh new water.
Yeah, we did say increase the usage and projected use of recycled water in agriculture.
I think that's different. That's like reclaimed water.
Okay, so should we say recycled and gray water?
And the and the reuse of gray water.
Recycled water.
Recycled is different from gray water. Yeah. It'd be so nice to uncap our washing machines.
Okay, so increase usage and projected use of recycled water and use of gray water in agriculture? Or usage? Usage.
Allowable use. Right now, it's not allowed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer, on the data side and research and development, I think we're looking at cell A26. I would just look at transparency on the data or open source. It's one language that I've found has become very useful as far as accessibility.
Okay.
Just might want to include something to that effect.
Okay. So do we want to include both of those? Transparent and open source data?
I think transparent is fine.
Okay.
I think open source can come, it means a whole heap of different things.
Okay.
Transparent and accessible.
Oh, we haven't gotten there. Actually.
Kind of goes on with that conversation you might have had with Shay and Ian today.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Good, all right. Okay. So develop transparent databases. Is that okay?
Yeah, transparent and openly accessible or something to that effect, right? Like it's you don't want, like, let's say one individual controlling that data, if that makes sense. Like anybody can access it and kind of see what's what.
Okay. Okay. Are you guys, is it not letting you get into the areas of need document?
I wasn't able to, it said I needed access.
Okay. I just got the emails that came through for you and Nathaniel. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can get it. It's in our folder, so it should be everybody in there, but I'm not sure why.
I thought it was just me because I couldn't remember my password for my Gmail account. So I never got in, but I could have access. I'm not sure.
Let's see.
It might be picking up my school email on the computer instead of my
Okay,
personal.
if you just request access, I'll hit share with everyone on my phone. I'm like, why is it not going through? Sorry. It should be working now, yeah, for the people that requested.
Yeah, mine does. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer, sorry for joining late. Do you mind dropping that link in the chat box really quick so I can make sure that I can access it?
Thank you, Jennifer. It's working for me now.
Okay. Okay, dropping it again. Sorry. Jerry. Jerry, no worries. I'm dropping 2 links in the chat for you to open up. One is the priority projects, initiatives, and programs, and then one is the survey summarized with the excerpts that we put for each area of need, just so we can reference back and forth.
Okay.
Okay, so do you guys want some more time to go over those things? We good? You want to get started? Okay, and then just for the folks that weren't here, so there is sheet 1. That's where we had kind of brainstormed all of the ideas, and then I made sheet 2 to start transferring over like the more of the like refined language once we developed that. So the first 2 were water and infrastructure that we got down, and then we started funding. But then I also saw that we had missed a key point of funding that we had put in the areas of need survey. So I put it and highlighted it and said we didn't discuss, so we could start on that. And then everything I think else would be covered that was in funding because there wasn't a ton. So if we, let's see, can you see my screen, or I have to share it again, I think. Oh, dang it, that's the wrong one, sorry. Okay, so funding here, we got to last time hire a minimum of 4 grant writers to focus on capital improvement project funding for the county via the department, and to focus on blanket grants for the community's basic needs and providing technical assistance, with one of the 2 specifically focused on servicing Molokai, Hana, and Lanai. Sorry. And then the thing that we didn't include was develop special funds and revolving funds to go directly towards agriculture. That was not in our brainstorm, but it was in the actual excerpt from the survey from the areas of need. So I thought it might be beneficial to put it in there, but want to see what you guys think, if you agree or don't agree. So I think we could be even more specific if we want to put it in there, so we can develop special funds, you know, that could be based on like service fees from the department. And then we could also develop revolving funds to do agricultural loans. So as the loans were paid back, they would keep going into a revolving fund to continue funding projects in the future. Do you guys want to get that specific? Put it in, not put it in? What do you think? Anybody got an opinion? Sorry.
I think that's great.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I couldn't see. Okay. So should we split it into two? And do develop special funds via like service fees from the department, and then develop a revolving fund for agricultural loans? Or just keep
Yeah,
it like
two.
this? Two?
2 is good.
Okay.
They'll understand it better.
What would be an example of a departmental service fee?
So basically, if we're providing like assistance to a business that can, you know, the department can charge for that. So like if you're providing grant writing assistance, it doesn't necessarily have to be free. It can be like low, like small amounts that you can charge. You can charge for permitting, things like that. Is usually what departments get their fees from. So like all of the ag permitting that currently goes to other departments right now, any fees from that or any penalties and things like that, those can all go towards special funds.
Well, like what sort of ag permitting are you thinking of?
So the streamlined permitting process where department would take over that portion, we could accrue we can take some of those service fees probably. Does that make sense?
So if I apply for a permit for farm labor dwelling, that's to the planning department. Would that be going through the Department of Agriculture, or would the Department of Agriculture just be helping us streamline the process with the planning department?
So as you streamline that process, some of that work falls onto the department, right? So then they could lobby for a portion of those fees because they're providing the service. Does that make sense?
It does, but it sounds complicated.
So like, there are like the liquor control board, they're like self-funding. Most of that is through their fees. So when there is like a penalty or something like that, they can use that funds to self-fund. So we can develop things like that. And like, as we're helping with research and development, if there's ways to, you know, provide that as a service that we can gain fees from that too, that's something that we could put back into a special fund. So basically any revenue that the department would make could be put into special funds.
Well, you know, the water department kind of operates that way, where a lot of their revenue comes from, a lot of their operating funds are from the revenue, and that's put them into a very difficult position for maintaining water infrastructure and service to the county, because they basically they don't have a big slug of money that comes out the general fund to do a lot of the necessary upgrades. And so I'm just wondering that if some of the funds that the department would be doling out as loans or things like that, if that comes strictly from service fees, it would seem to me you get kind of limited and boxed in, and people are working on making money in order to be able to provide loans or other things, grants to farmers. Whereas if the department can get a chunk of change from the general fund as part of the budget, then their focus is on getting funds out to farmers to get stuff done, rather than getting permits to bring in funds to get it out for farmers. See, it removes a whole step and sense of responsibility for them. And I think if they, if they could become funded by the general fund, then it makes them a more flexible department.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, so just keep it more broad to develop special funds to provide funding for local agriculture.
Sure, yeah, and then maybe each year, they have a list of things and they put that into
Mhm.
the budget committee and they say, this is what we need this year.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you could even, lobby for a little bit of like, maybe RPT to fund that and things like that. So, yeah, okay,
Hey,
that makes sense.
Jennifer, I had a quick,
Yeah.
I had a quick question. With regard to the special funds idea, are you looking to create or potentially addressing new special funds? Or are you trying to tap into current mechanisms that sort of put funds towards this new department?
So there's multiple things. We're trying to secure funding from the state, federal level and, foundational money as well. But then also developing special funds within the county as well as a funding mechanism.
The only reason I say that is because if we try to tap into current funds, I could see other departments getting a little upset that you're taking away some of their revenue, say from the permitting. I'm sure the permitting department or division would be a little like, you're stepping into our territory and that's our funding.
Yeah, they might be like that, but the real is like the realism is that the community has not felt like the current permitting processes have been benefiting the ag sector, and so they're asking for the ag department to take some of that over. And so because that was not meeting the community's needs, that work will have to transfer over to the Department of Ag and it will have to be funded. And so they might have to part with some of those that some of that revenue that they're used to getting, but that, that's just the reality of how it works, It might not be, might not be the most, fun thing, but it's not unviable, I don't think. Go ahead, Jerry.
I guess I hadn't envisioned that the Department of Agriculture would be taking over permitting per se, but they would certainly be working on behalf of the agricultural community to streamline permitting. And so they would kind of be a go-between between the agricultural community and RPT or the water department. And, we talked in the ag working group about having, one farm plan, trying to come up with something that makes it easier for agricultural components of our of Maui County to not have to every year apply for water rates for 7 different TMKs they have, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I'm not quite sure how that they would.
Sorry, we've got somebody.
I'm not sure how they would
just
generate income, or if they should be generating income, or if they should just be kind of helping farmers and ranchers deal with the water department, RPT, and planning department.
So in the areas of need, we said a streamlined permitting process. Here, let's see. And when we had discussed that before, it was looking for the department to create kind of like a one application with knowledgeable ag inspectors under the department to go out, do those inspections, do the permitting, and then disseminate that information to the other departments rather than everyone working in a silo. And so that will be a burden of, a workload for the department. So asking for some of those service fees, I don't think is like unheard of, and it would still be doing kind of the same thing you want. But if you're looking to create, keep all of the separate applications and having the department do that, that's going to be even more work because they're going to have to navigate. even more. So it would make more sense to just do one with all of the needed information from all of the departments onto one permitting process with knowledgeable ag inspectors.
I think at least in some of the discussions we had in the ag working group is that if you actually had knowledgeable inspectors that went out to properties when people are applying for ag water rates or to RPT for ag tax rates, that the amount of money that the county could generate from missed opportunities of tax revenue that are now going to be covered off by not having knowledgeable inspectors, that that would increase revenue substantially for the county.
Mhm.
But that would just be in the general fund because taxation primarily would change.
Yeah, but you could ask for a portion of that or the difference to be allocated to ag in a special fund.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, rather than permitting fees and things like that, ask for part of a, some segment of the general fund each year, and you can make the case that, hey, since we put the ag inspectors out, the people that have the 3-acre property and had ag tax rates, with the pet goats and the one papaya tree, they're not getting ag tax rates anymore. They're at a different bracket, and that's working to the benefit of the general revenue.
Yeah. We also have we have the affordable housing special fund, we have the open space special fund, so they can do stuff like that for ag too. And it can be out of the general fund, or it can be like an actual special fund that they put money into every year for ag. So do we want to change the language, or does that, and make it more clear, or do we want to leave it like that? Develop special funds to provide funding for local agriculture. Develop revolving funds to provide loads for agriculture. Do you want to be specific on the funding mechanisms, or just leave it open for them to decide the best fit?
Personally, I'd want to leave it open.
Okay.
But I'm not
Anybody
the
else
only
I'm like, does anybody else have opinions? We're good, leave it open?
Yeah, I mean, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
I agree with Jerry. So
okay,
every producer or rancher, they're gonna have different needs in different, areas, right? It's not all gonna fit in one box. So I think we need to kind of keep it open, because I can see something like this where you could tie it into labor development. So a lot of farms are seasonal and they may not need help. Maybe they have a harvest period where they need help with harvesting, then they have no work offered. So if we can move talent, around the island and have, help doing that, versus, that's one example of probably 1,000. So I agree to leave it open.
leave it open, okay. Sounds good. All right. Do we want to add anything else to funding, or are these 3 things sufficient?
Just a comment, when the MEO micro grant program was rolled out last year, or was it this year?
Last year.
That was super popular. It didn't really help out, I think, in some of the largest, it helped everybody out that got the money, but that was a good kick for a lot of small startups to get going. So I know MEO is a nonprofit, but if we can support that somehow too, that was a big help.
Okay, so yeah, the county gave MEO that money and they administered the money, administered the
Yes.
grant. So I think that's definitely doable. Do we, so I know in here we said, where is it at? Where's funding? So we put secure federal and state funding, develop special funds to go directly toward agriculture, provide grants and funding to ag-related businesses in Maui County, and then provide grant writing assistance to ag-related businesses, communities, projects, and needs. Do we want to, again, specify the secure federal and state funding, or do you guys think that is been said enough that it's clear, or what do you guys think?
Enough and clear.
Huh?
Said enough and clear.
Okay, so this is okay then, we're good with these three? We want,
Jennifer,
yeah,
I would think that a line of credit would be valuable, so that people could tap into it, and somehow it's sort of some USDA guarantees and SBA guarantees things. So if we could figure out a way that we could have a pot of money that people could get a line of credit against, that isn't as hard to work with, make a small purchase, big purchase, whatever. But just focusing on grants is good. But again, having some access to capital from the farmer or rancher perspective, I think would be additionally valuable.
so do we want to say develop revolving funds to provide loans and credit, or do we want to do it in a different way and just say provide credit for the access?
You don't want to get into the business of providing credit, but having a pot of money that somebody could get a line of credit against. There's a difference between a line of credit and credit. So to me, that's you can get a line of credit against your home, but if you had some entity that you could tap into for $10,000 to buy something that has a good convenient payback, you can secure this through banks and other places. But the idea, I'm just trying to get the idea that you don't have to go get a loan per se, but it's just a line of credit that you can tap to.
So a revolving fund is kind of similar, like you can continue to borrow on that.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Same. Yeah, the same kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, so we do have developed revolving funds to provide loans for local agriculture. Do we want to add credit to that, or just revolving funds to provide loans verbiage? Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Does that kind of cover what you wanted to, Nathaniel? Sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Gary brings up a really good point. So I personally know at least 3 farms who at the startup, they don't know how to write a business plan, right? They're good at farming. They're not necessarily good at writing a business plan. And went to several different lenders. No one would loan the money, and they ended up using credit cards. Looking back at it now, they're actually really successful, but they had to start, and they farmed for 10 years with no loans, right? They couldn't get approved for any loans. They had no credit. So I don't know how to spell that out or how to flesh that out, but it's a really valid point that Gary brings up.
And there, in that is kind of a good thing to talk about. So making sure that a lot of these resources are focused on the right size businesses, which actually need the support the most, is going to be something that we'll have to talk about. But we should probably spell that out. So, the USDA defines like small and medium agricultural businesses, like small, I believe it's anywhere under 300,000, and then medium sizes under $1 million, or from 300,000 to $1 million. Do we want to like spell that out like in legislation for the department that these resources should be provided primarily to small and medium sized agricultural businesses, so that way we don't have to put it in everything that we say? Go ahead, Nathaniel.
I can only speak on my experience on that, but what I've seen is I know a lot of folks that they can maybe do $1 million in sales, but then their expenses are $999,000, right? So they only bring in $6,000. So they may be a very big operation and have a lot of overhead and need a lot of equipment, but they're not super profitable. So just focusing in on those numbers, I think was like with the micro grants, going back to that, a lot of people got that grant, but some of them had maybe 2 pigs and 5 trees, which is fine. But those were based off their revenue. And I don't know if that's the most accurate way to get the funding out to the people that need it.
I would agree. I think that we should be promoting agriculture on all scales, and I
Mhm.
think each sector and each level has, attributes that we should be helping to grow. And if we want to address food security, we are going to need some bigger farmers and ranches. And so I don't think we should exclude helping those farmers grow and whatever those needs look like.
Jerry?
Yeah, I had two things. The first one that Nathaniel talked about, where you have beginning farmers that are having difficulty getting loans and everything like that. I kind of view that if I'm a beginning farmer and I know that there's a Department of Agriculture, I can make a date to go down and talk with the folks there, and I say, hey, we're starting a farm. What are the resources that are out there? Because if you have to go and look at, poke around and find them on your own, farmers don't always have a lot of time to do that kind of stuff. So it's really nice that the Department of Ag could be like the middle person or a clearinghouse that would connect potential funding programs with the farmers. And then just an add-on to that is that, we got one of those MEO micro grants, and they were, for us, they're a game changer. But when the guy came to deliver, one of the things we got was a utility vehicle, and the grant paid for about 2/3 of that, and we ponied up the rest of it. When the guy came and dropped the vehicle off, I said, hey, you want to go see our farm? And he's like, well, sure. And so I took him around and showed him our farm. And afterwards he said, I think this program is really great, but they should have had people going out and looking at all the farms that received funding, because we've given vehicles and equipment to farms that, quote unquote, that wouldn't really pass the mustard as a true farming operation. And I think we have to be careful of that. And so that's, one place where the Department of Ag could be a little bit more in terms of looking at farm operations and beyond just what's on paper for being eligible to receive funding. So those are my 2 cents.
Makalea raised her hand, and then go ahead.
Oh, I raised my hand earlier, but I did have a comment. It was just, I had heard it a couple of times, but just providing other services to farmers like business plan writing would be huge. So, I think that's somewhere in there, and I don't think it needs to be on this line item, but that is the other support services that will help farmers get those loans. You need to help them write those business plans.
Yeah, and I think the resource data, developing a resource database to point people in those directions, because I know that the Ag Incubator will help write business plans, and MEDB does too, yeah, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and then I think Micah, you were next with your comment.
Yeah, I just had 2 quick comments. Just on the ag loan front, the State Department of Agriculture provides a pretty solid source for a bunch of people seeking loans, and it's really meant to be that sort of stopgap. When all else fails, you can go to them. It's not to say it's perfect, but it does exist. And so I think if you look at where there's some gaps within the state loan program, you might find some opportunity for a county loan program. For example, I think the way it currently stands with the state ag program or ag loan program is you actually have to own a farm for 2 years before you can actually get a loan from them. And so there's sort of that 2-year in between from startup farmers or those that just finished training and want to do their own farm and want to get some capital to really put into their infrastructure, whether it's the initial cost of equipment or land, and they can't get it. So there really is a gap that exists there within the state ag loan program. So trying to look at ways the county can kind of stand up and help some of these beginning farmers out a little bit more, that would be important. My second comment is around eligibility, and this is kind of important with funding across the state, but really I think if you're a county looking at trying to be inclusive, I think you should really look at how the county will deliver grants, will deliver loans, will deliver any type of service, because usually, and I think everyone knows this, you have to meet certain requirements that are very cumbersome, whether it be, you need to, show that you're in good standing, you pay your taxes, so on and so forth. But at times there's things like liability insurance, for example, that's huge, that people need to have. And it's a risk issue that government kind of doesn't really want to pull itself away from. But at times it's a very hard thing to ask for of a small farmer, or even just an entity seeking to get into the game. So I think that that's something that should be considered, as far as if there's ways to kind of tinker with it, or kind of make it a little bit more open for those that might not be able to do that work.
Yeah, I know that throughout the comments, throughout the survey and for the areas of need, the thing that was said a lot was to make sure that we're focusing on small farms. This should go to small farms. This help should be for small farms. So making sure that we are, keeping that in mind as we develop the county, because a lot of the perception is that state help goes to the larger farms, and it kind of leaves the smaller, medium farms behind. So just, putting that back out there. And then I think, Gary, you've got your hand up too.
Yes. So a couple of things just for everybody. The MEO is going to restart a new micro program. People have to reapply even if they've been accepted before. So you might want to start looking into what's coming up new and next, just as some information. So I'll just stop with that.
Okay. Does anybody else have?
The only thing I'd add in, Jennifer, is like if there is concern of, I guess, people getting too many grants or whatnot, you could seek out matching type programs, maybe small match, so that people kind of put some skin in the game, potentially to help themselves out in order to get certain granting fund or loan opportunities. It just depends how that kind of gets put up. But usually, when you seek out federal or even state funding, it does require some sort of match. So just keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a big barrier for new startup and small farms, though, that matching grant portion.
The idea of doing in kind, or kind of covering it with other means rather than cash on hand is an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Micah brings up a good point too. Like even just getting insurance is extremely challenging. I think I went through 10 different providers before I was approved, and my rates were really high, just because ag is kind of, people look at it as it's a dangerous industry. You're working around equipment or whatever. So yeah, anything that we can help to kind of remove some of those barriers.
Okay, so do we want to be a little bit more specific in these? Do we just kind of want to take notes and, put that forward when we put this in a report? Like, as you develop these, as the department develops the special funds or develops a revolving fund, maybe having different, I guess, requirements for different farm sizes and the amounts that they can be awarded?
Yeah, access, grant sizes, just some recommendations. Also, one of the things I would think is that they ought to have an expert on small, medium, and large farms that people can go to get the proper help.
Yeah, and to Jerry's point earlier, with going back to the micro grants, it was really good to see everyone get that kind of money, but also like some of them were pretty sketch, and were used, getting the ATVs, but then not necessarily having a farm to ride it on, or so there wasn't a whole lot of follow through. It was great. The program was really good, but if the county does want to do those things, I think maybe a farm inspection, or at least follow up on that, would make sure that
they're gonna do that. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
I'm working with them. Yeah.
Okay. So do we want to like word that in a certain way in here? Here comes the wordsmithing part, the fun part, right? Like, how do we want to say that? Do we want to say it specifically? Do we want to just add that as notes? Do we want to, like, how do we want to do that? Because funding is not going to be the only thing, right? So as we're talking about like markets and distribution, how do we have them focus that effort? How, you know, is that something that we want to put verbally into the strategic plan to kind of say like, these efforts should be focused on, you know, making sure that the resources provided make sense for the different size farms, and the department should be helping all sized farms, including startups to large farms. Do we want to put that in here under each section?
Would it cover it if you just put all in front of local agriculture? Funding for all local agriculture? Not just large or small, but all. Like keep them aware, everybody out there. Not just the big guys.
Or not just the little guys.
Equally, or? Yeah,
No,
no,
not
just all.
equally.
Okay,
Fair isn't everybody getting the same thing. Fair is everybody getting what they need to succeed. Some need a little more and some just need a little bit.
equitable, provide equitable funding for all local agriculture.
I think it's worth putting all, but say, and then in parentheses or whatever, put big and small, just to, you know, highlight the fact that there is variety, but not having it like go in depth.
Okay,
I do think some of the smaller agricultural operations in Maui County, you know, when reading something like this, would say, yeah, that's fine, but does Mahi Pono really need to get grants and loans from Maui County?
so that's the other thing, is that one thing that people said with the state is that, yeah, they have all this assistance, but it's not going into the small and medium-sized farms. It's going into very large size operations, and that the small and medium farms can't get assistance, especially if they're startups. It takes them a really long time to be able to qualify for anything if they ever do. So that, and seeing that target language, make sure this is benefiting small farmers, and we want to see economic development. So that's going to include startups. So, you know, the first couple of years, they might not look like they're doing anything. You know, is that going to deter the department from helping them? Because if we want startups and we want to increase agricultural operations, it's going to be some startups that take a few years to get started. And, you know, as a farmer, that can be, depending on what you're farming, it can be kind of a long time. So I do
think it's okay to get specific.
Yeah, I think it's worth, you know, that is worth maybe even discussing that in the legislation, you know, like there should be equitable assistance provided to different size agricultural businesses, ranging from startups all the way to large agricultural operations. I don't know what you guys, I mean, if we want to do that in the strategic plan, or if we want to put that in legislation, or what, but I think it is, you know, saying all, we might want to get a little bit more specific. I don't know if we necessarily have to do it here. But yeah, there is a lot of people that are not going to want the majority of funding going to large agricultural operations. And that's generally what it has happened in the past. I'm not sure who raised first, or Gary, did you ever take your hand down? Okay, and then between Makalea and Lauren, I'm not sure. Either one of you can go.
Lauren, you're first.
Thanks so much. That's so kind of you. Sorry to interrupt you before, Jen. I didn't mean to. But I think here we can say, with an emphasis on supporting small agricultural operations, like I think that's completely appropriate to emphasize for funding. And we could even get more specific if we wanted to as a group and say, with a focus on supporting small agricultural operations and young farmers. Like, who do we want to really target with county funding? Like, is it young farmers? Is it small operations? I think there's many ways that the DoA can support all levels of farming. Like, I would love to see Mahi Pono secure a lasting contract with DOE so they can get into schools on every island. And for any large agricultural group, Maui Cattle or anyone who's able to really feed our large institutions, I would love to support them however we could. So I think that there's multiple ways for us to support larger agricultural interests. And for funding in this specific instance, I think it's absolutely okay to highlight small growers and other individuals who need the extra support. Makalea, on to you.
Makalea?
I would respectfully disagree. I think that it's really hard to hone in, especially at this stage, on who and how we support. I love the word equitable, but it's how we decide what equitable is. And right now, in the current environment, we're actually looking at like equitable being vulnerable populations and indigenous communities and like Black Lives Matter, Black communities. And that's happening at the federal level. And so I don't know, going back to equitable, I think right now we don't have to make those decisions, but I think we should be saying that we support all levels of farming if we are looking for food resiliency and food sovereignty in Hawaii. And I would not want to exclude, just because they're a large farmer, like I think somebody else on the call had said, you can be a large farmer, you can have big acreage, but you also have a large expenses, and that doesn't mean that you're profitable. And so just because we have this idea of targeting maybe Mahi Pono and not wanting to help Mahi Pono, that also excludes a lot of other people that would need help. And so just for me personally, I would not want to exclude them at this point, but let the department through their processes figure out, you know, who and how we would need to support to create food sovereignty here in Hawaii.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily the discriminating against large size farms so much as it's maybe like where the profits go from those farms. And I think a lot of the times with small to medium sized farms, they're locally owned, they're from here, and the profits are staying here. So the taxpayers probably would support funding those projects more than they would a larger entity whose profits might be offshore.
I was just going to comment on that. I was wondering if that was even worth exploring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all of that kind of stuff really makes sense because, you know, when you look at any area of assistance across the spectrum, like let's say you're looking at the digital divide, they, you know, really drive home to be very specific in the language of who you're wanting to help the most, who you want to target the most, because the people that have the abilities to already access assistance or things like that, they are able to find those opportunities more easily. They're able to access those opportunities more easily. So sometimes when you specify that you want to help a specific subgroup specifically, then it creates this need to go out of the way to make sure you're reaching that specific subgroup so that they're getting assistance. And I think that's something that we've kind of seen with the state and federal funding, is that the people that have the money, the larger entities that have the money, that have the time, that have the resources to find those opportunities and obtain them, are the ones that are getting the help Whereas the smaller, medium-sized farmers or startups that don't have maybe the knowledge, time, or resources to put that effort in are the ones that are getting left behind.
What if you put like businesses that are registered in Hawaii? I don't know if you can put that in there, but I think that's getting at the core of like, it doesn't matter if you're small or big, but if you're here and you're contributing to our taxes and employing people and the funding is staying here. I don't even know if that's legal, but that sounds better than saying that you're only targeting like a specific income level.
It's a tough road to hoe. I mean, a lot of those large businesses, they do provide a lot of income for the local economy, right? They provide jobs, they pay taxes here, but they may not, their headquarters may be located in Europe or somewhere in the mainland somewhere. So I don't know what the right answer is.
Someone said, wait, who is it? Sorry, I have to scroll up. Lauren said, could we change the word to include equitable access to funding? Maybe conclude the sentence with in support of food sovereignty in Maui County. What that is wording.
I think that we need to be careful if we include that word food sovereignty, because then we're talking about what are we supporting? Where is that product going? So if we talk about food sovereignty, then we're also, and depending on what that definition is, we're then considering, are we supporting our local food production for our local community? So if that commodity is being grown to be shipped somewhere else, is that food sovereignty? So I just would like to caution everyone in terms of when we use that word, what that definition is and how we want to include that language into this. And when we talk about sizes of farms and where their end product is going.
So I think this, as we're talking about like how we would like the department to prioritize like assistance provisions, maybe we table that for now so we can get through some of this stuff. And then that seems like it's kind of a more in-depth discussion to really boil that down. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. It seems to me that, and I was going to ask the question of whether or not the discussion that we're having now, which I really like and is an essential discussion to have, is this the time to have it now? Or, you know, in a year from now when the department is up and going, should there be a group of us that kind of brainstorm criteria for extending whatever funding the department's able to secure?
Yeah, and we could even, I mean, like after we finish this, we could just work on a couple different options of wording to put that in the survey to see what, you know, jives best with the community, to see what they do, because we could put, you know, 3 or 4 different things and have people vote on which one makes more sense too. So we could get through this and then target that at the end too. You guys want to do that? Okay.
I think so, because I probably have another 20 minutes of discussion minimum.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry to get sidetracked. Okay, so we're good on funding for now then. And then we are going to go to research and development. Okay, so what we have in these lines for research and development are way over in here in D is identify issues, research solutions, and develop action plans to address the issues. Create the capacity for research development within the department. Establish a pipeline of database for farmers to access available resources. Develop the transparent, openly accessible databases to collect and collate the data needed for the department and the ag sector to promote data awareness. Coordination with research institutions to collect and collate data to provide suggestions for research. And then ozone treatment. Implement community assessments, develop metrics to measure reporting requirements, develop partnerships to collect necessary reporting matrix, create databases, streamline permitting processes, collect data, combine, develop standard metrics with knowledgeable agriculturalists in various fields, experts, develop proper training programs to assess these standards, collect data, and distribute to other departments. Review ag-related permitting process. So it feels like we can kind of combine some of these languages. We've got quite a bit on databases. We've got some on the permitting process. And data collection. Jerry said he will, back in 10 minutes, he's got to feed cows. So let's start with this one, create central excellent. Sorry. Create the capacity for research and development within the department. Do you see anything else that can be combined with that, or should it stand alone? Okay. I don't hear anything that could be combined. Oh, maybe that was what we were doing for language, because that has the colon afterwards. Okay, so establish a pipeline and database for farmers to access available resources. So I think that was the develop the resource database. Do we want to change the wording on that or keep it the same?
When you mean establish a pipeline for resources, would that be something like?
I think it
an
would be
example?
kind of the same as develop transparent and openly accessible databases to collect and collate data needed for the department and ag sector to promote data awareness. I personally think that would be the same. Just two different versions of the wording. This one is specifically for farmers and the other one is more broad-based.
So when you mean resources, we're talking about resources within the county and the state and fed. We're not talking about agricultural resources.
I think it could be both. I don't know who wrote this one.
Because I think it could be both too. And I think something like for an example, if you know where to purchase drip line connectors, like where's the most, I don't know, something like that.
Or like for newer farmers, like where you can get your soil tested, who helps with a specific kind of loan, who helps with business
Exactly.
plans, who helps with grant writing, that kind of stuff.
Field
Okay.
inspections, everything.
Okay, so this is a standalone basically, yeah, for the database for farmers to access available resources. Do we need to be more specific on that language? Maybe establish a pipeline to gather resource opportunities for the ag sector and create a database for the community to access or be connected with available resources. Or
Yeah, I think something like that. Like an example, there's funding for farms for when you put in native plants. You can get funding for fence lines, but like, where do we buy them? Who sells native plants? I don't even know where to begin. I know a couple of small local institutions, but like, where can we get the volume needed? So just little things like that.
okay, so establish a pipeline to gather resource opportunities for the ag sector and create a database for ag businesses to be able to be connected with available resources. Does that make sense? Was that what you were saying? Sorry. Okay. Okay, what's another one? Develop transparent and openly accessible databases to collect and collate the data needed for the department and ag sector to promote data awareness. So this is different than being connected with available resources. But similar, oh wait, I guess this is to provide suggestions for research. I feel like these two can be kind of the same or be lumped in together. What do you guys think for A and B26?
I think it could be the same, Jennifer.
Okay. Do we think that A26 would cover B26, or do we need to be more specific?
I would combine them though. I think they are two separate things. One is a simple database. The other is kind of the action and steps that database can go towards, if that makes sense.
Okay. So combine them, but separately. You want to help me with language?
Yeah, I think you can leave cell A the same to promote data awareness, to basically, gosh, I'm losing it. Everything just moved.
Sorry.
So within data awareness, that will facilitate the potential coordination with research institutions. Shoots, as you read it, it's like it is separate, but it is the same, right?
Yeah, it's very similar, but more specific. I think it's okay to put both of them.
I'll give a quick example here, right? Like, it's okay. So you have NASA Harvest come in. They're using AI and business intelligence to utilize satellite images to map invasive species and what's being grown. Great. So that's a great partnership. But now you have the database that you can measure these things and utilize them. So it's like a Venn diagram. There's definitely overlap, but they're definitely separate as well.
Yeah. Anybody else do want to weigh in on if there's better verbiage to combine or to leave separate?
I can comment on this, and I don't know if this applies to this directly, but so I know a lot of growers, like what a lot of growers look for is our market, right? We look for a market. We don't know necessarily where the demand is, right? So we have to go out, maybe have to go sell our product, or you got to, word of mouth, or try and advertise. But if you knew that, a group of restaurants were looking for product A, and kind of like at that capacity, and having to, being able to, we talked about this once before, and I don't know if this is in this area, but it's kind of how I'm thinking.
Yeah, like how you fill in the gaps of what's being grown, how much of it's being grown. Should you start growing this? Should you start growing something else? Like where the market needs for those are, that kind of stuff.
I think kind of, it's a touchy thing. So a lot of growers, maybe they have a market and they don't want competition, obviously. So they're not going to go out and say, hey, we service this people at this price. But there may be, I don't know, there may be, we're importing so much product. I can't really verbalize what I'm thinking right now, but I'm just wondering if that's something what this tool would help with.
Yeah, I mean,
I would love to chat on this just real quick. So as a heads up, at Maui United Way, we're trying to measure what the needs are, right? So we're working with UH right now and their data science team, and Gary, I think your name has been mentioned in this a couple of times in the system science class as well. But it's to measure what the needs are, right? Like, what are the actual needs within the community? What are the nutritional needs? What is recommended? What's the food deserts? What food is available? What's the real costs on those imports? How many tourists are here? What tourists are eating? So we're trying to develop really that basic tool right now. And I think that it could play into something like this about what's actually needed. So to piggyback on that is we're doing a program in about 2 weeks for DOE, right? There's massive, and I know DOE was mentioned before, there's massive capacity right there in the Cow for Keiki supper program, and basically meal boxes delivered to students that are produced locally. Well, what does that need and how many students are there? You know, how is that distribution network laid out? So we're trying to map that out now. And I think if there are resources to help everyone do that and keep it open source, I think that's certainly on the horizon. So I don't know if that aligns here, if that's kind of where you're going with it, but it's what is the actual need? What do people need? And how do we keep it here locally instead of kind of bringing it in, right?
Gary, you raised your hand.
So Nick, I will comment, and I need to talk to you about this specifically. I do have a grant from the county to develop that product, and I've actually been working on it for several months. So I've actually got a prototype.
Me gusta.
So let's talk.
And then, so when I'm looking at this now and hearing you guys, it actually seems kind of like two different steps. It's just, especially when we're talking about a strategic plan, it sounds like the first portion would be to coordinate with research institutions to collect and collate data and provide suggestions for research. And then that research can be utilized to create these databases to collect and collate the data needed for the department and the ag sector to promote data awareness. Does that sound right? So it would be two separate steps with the coordination with the research institutions coming first. But please let me know if I'm incorrect. That's just what I'm hearing. I got a thumbs up from Teresa. Anybody else that talked? Yeah, oh, sorry, I can't see. So when I'm sharing my screen, I can only see like 3 boxes at a time. I apologize. Okay, so I'm going to, oh, what happened? Okay, so I'm going to move that over. Let's see. Do we want, do we want to start establishing the pipeline to gather resource opportunities for the ag sector and create a database before we start the coordination with the research institutions for research? Does that seem like a viable step? We want to be able to kind of help the farmers point that in the direction, and that also might help the department also know who they should be coordinating with as well. Does that seem like a logical progression? Or do we want to move that around a little bit?
That sounds good there. Does that pipeline also include available farms and farmers looking for work?
So it says to gather resource opportunities. I would think so, yeah. So if there's available land, if there's help with you know, assistance, volunteers, things like that. Like I know a lot of people don't know about Hands on Maui. They provide volunteers. That's an example. You know, if there's an ag program looking for education or a school looking for education, that there's like Grow Some Good, that there's, you know, all of these other opportunities. So I think creating that database will also help as they move on to the next step of the coordination part 2, because then they will have that own resource database to refer to make sure that they're hitting all of those notches as well. Okay. Yeah, of course. Thank you guys. The next one is House bill that requires 10% minimum local. Oh wait, Micah.
Sorry, I got trigger happy with the reactions. My fault. Just wanted to make a quick comment on the data piece and what some have mentioned. I think it's great that you touch on the research and the availability of resources that people can tap into. But I think it's building on what Nathaniel said, and it's making providing these data sources to make market decisions that will lead to a competitive local product. So I think if we can kind of state that, that would be great, or making our local product compete with imports so as to influence import replacements. I think that's really important. I know that Ulupono in the past, we've tried to partner with the state to do just that,
Mhm.
to find some of these metrics as to what the market demands, what's the cost, and then allowing this information to go out to farmers to really make business decisions, whether they should create or crop this crop or that crop based upon what the need is here locally and what you can bring in economically. So it's a business decision after looking at some of these data points. So I would want to see something in some of this database or data gathering that really informs market decisions for growers.
Okay, so that seems like it would go in the third one, the develop transparent, openly accessible databases to collect and collate the data needed for the department and the ag sector to promote data awareness. So that would be kind of larger scale, where the first one is like actual like companies, resources, or things that are already in existence that people can go to for help. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that. And I think it does fit with the third. I would just want to make it more, I think, explicit.
So
To
include, do we want
make
to
it,
say,
to just, essentially, you want to say something along the lines of making the local product more competitive in the marketplace. I don't know how you state that, but that's the end goal, right? Is to find a market for your product that can compete with imports so as to influence import replacement.
okay, slow down. So I'm gonna say including market, sorry.
No,
Including
sorry.
market data to
I'm sorry, you're looking for me to keep
yeah,
talking.
yeah. So I couldn't keep up with you typing wise. So you said including
no.
market data to do like push out imports, or you had a really nice verbiage that you used, but I couldn't catch it quite quickly enough.
I think it's to influence import replacement at the end of the day. And with that comes a competitive local product with our imports. I don't know how you say that, but just making our local products more competitive.
Okay, I think influencing import replacement is sufficient. But we can add by making competitive market products. What do you guys think? Do you think influence import replacement is enough?
I can speak a little bit on some of that just from my experience. It's very, very hard for us to be economically competitive with producers offshores or off our shores. So I would more, I think, if we're gonna increase the amount of local food production and support that, it's gonna have to most likely be subsidized. Is my gut feeling, because I've personally tried several different markets, and it's just like the inputs are so incredibly high. It's very hard to be competitive with bananas or anything that's not that's not grown here. So, but I am the research part is we're so isolated. We don't know what wholesalers are getting their products from distributors from the mainland or from Brazil or from wherever. We have no clue what that is. So that would actually be valuable just to see how far off we are in cost. So
And
I
then
would agree with Mike's sentiment on the research part.
I think too, I don't know how to say this, but including market data to influence import replacement should also include hidden costs that are not being reflected. So if our ag operations operated the same way that they did in, like, say, China or Brazil, like what hidden costs would we have to pay at the county level to offset that? You know what I mean? We don't want to go down that road either. Micah?
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think that this information is helpful to make those decisions. I don't think it's the only information you use at the end of the day to kind of make it competitive or truly influence the end result of import replacement. You're gonna need a huge marketing campaign behind it. You really need to market your product, and you need to have strong quality controls to make your product stand out. So I think that there's other things and other aspects that really influence an import replacement product other than pure scale to be economically, competitive in an imported market. So it's going to be tough, but I think that's having that information on hand is like the first step.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of our competition outside Hawaii are using methods and chemistries and labor that is actually maybe we consider unethical, so I agree. Having that information, or maybe having some transparency on where we're getting these products from and their practices, that might help sway some minds and some money.
Anyone else? Okay, so do we want to add anything else onto that, or are we okay with that verbiage? And then we have the House Bill 817 that requires a minimum of local purchasing of ag products. I noticed that we had a comment, so this was put down by Lauren. Hunter had said HB 817 is only for state departments listed here, and I had sat in on the group with Lauren, and so I responded and checked with her, and she said that this was correct, but you're on here, yeah? So
Yep, I'm here.
okay. How do you want to include this in infrastructure? Do you want to kind of go into this a little bit?
Sure. I'm trying to remember what else we talked about in the group.
Yeah, so I think we went over it. So I said, I believe Laura added this, and even though it's the state departments, our food system will be able to, or will need to be able to meet that need. So the group discussed using this as a goal to build the infrastructure and also try to implement at the county level too. So do we want to change the verbiage of this? Maybe to start setting benchmarks to be able to mandate minimum local purchasing?
I mean, from my perspective, I think that would be great. Just when I talk, I think I'm trying to remember in the group too, when we talked about this, just looking at the benchmarks that are set up in the bill, and it's going to be a while. So I don't know if that was something where folks felt like maybe having our own at the county might help to kind of speed that up, or I'm trying to remember what else we said, but that was something that stuck out to me, was that, those benchmarks, it was like, 25 years, 30 years, 50 years, and how do we maybe try to get to, even if it's lower percentages, just sooner rather than later. I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Okay. So does that look okay? Language-wise, develop benchmarks to begin meeting local purchasing mandates and implement at the county level. I think that also kind of ties into kind of like the governor's plan of where we were going to increase food, security by a certain amount, but they didn't even have the benchmarks of where we were at with that to be able to scale up. So I think it's a conversation that has kind of been had about like, how are we implementing these legislative mandates or goals without the benchmarks? Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, given the response that people have to the term mandate, I would probably suggest using local purchasing targets or goals rather than mandates.
Okay, that makes sense. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, Lauren said yes, that's a good point. So I agree. Anybody disagree? Purchasing goals. Okay, so we've got that in there. Do we agree that that goes below the other things that we've already put in there? Or do we want to move that up the chain?
I think it's good.
Okay. The next one is identify issues, research solutions, and develop action plans to address the issues. So I feel like that was kind of in the beginning preface part, create the capacity for research and development within the department to do these other things. Do we want to put that specifically in there? Or do we think that's, or we could spell it out more in the preface? Sorry, there's a chat. Apologies, Nick's got to sign off. Thank you, Nick. Sorry. So it's identify issues, researches, solutions, and develop action plans to address the issues. So that's what we're hoping to see from the research and development department. Do we want to add that in specifically so that is something that they get started on with right away? Or do we want to just kind of add that in and have these be the things that they get started on right away? Bueller? Bueller?
It's good.
Okay. Good, add it in. Good, it's the way it is. We don't need it added in. Sorry.
It's good.
I think it's covered with the other established, or I'm sorry, the coordination with research institutes.
Okay.
I think it's very similar in that
Okay.
sense.
Okay, and then we have ozone treatment. It's kind of like, I don't know who put it in there or what it's referring to.
Does it have to do with the Hawaii air quality permit?
Jerry?
No, actually, that was probably me that chucked that in there. You know, we talk a lot about biosecurity and stuff that gets imported into the state. And I know we have a fraction of the number of inspectors at the Department of Agriculture, at the airport, and the docks that we actually need. So all kinds of creepy crawlies come into our state. And that's a real problem. And I think methyl bromide or something like that, there was some sort of fumigation technique that had been used for a while, but is being phased out. So you're kind of left with, well, what do you have? Just inspection or what? So I know that the coffee industry had looked into ozone treatment as a way of decreasing the introduction of fungal spores and insect larvae and stuff like that. And so it's just an idea as to whether or not the Department of Ag could be a part of a broader movement to at least assess the potential for ozone treatment as a non-invasive way that doesn't leave a toxic residue that would allow us to decrease the load of incoming pests that clearly come in because we just don't have the people to do the amount of inspection that we need. I mean, I can't tell you how many new pests we've had over the 15 years that we've been farming that weren't here when we started. They didn't just come in from down the street, they came in from somewhere else. And that has a really big impact on agriculture. So that was an idea that
makes
that's why I chucked that in there.
So do we want to put that specifically in research and development, or do we want to put that under the invasive species area?
It might be better in the invasive species area as a way to decrease the number of particularly insects and some fungal and microbial spores coming in, or at least assess the potential for that.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it's down here too. Okay, so I'm gonna take it out of here. Okay, and then the next one is implement community assessments. I feel like that could kind of go in with these just generally. And then also we have that in the reporting requirements. Do we want to put that in, or is that kind of already covered? Because I know that we did community assessments to rate the department and things that was in the reporting requirements as well. So they'll already have that guidance. Do we want to be that specific in the strategic plan that comes like one of the first things that's going to make the most impact? Or do we think that the coordination they're doing with research for the databases is specific enough?
I'm trying to wrap my brain around what that would mean, like community assessment, like accessing what the county, benchmarks that are made, or how the needle's moving.
I think it's going to be basically, community assessments can be anything broad. I didn't write this down, I don't think. So it could be that they were referring to like how the department's doing, or community assessments on available land, or what water or issues or things like that. It could be, we can make it specific unless whoever added it knows specifically.
Yeah, I think as long as it doesn't get too far in the weeds, as a community member, I certainly wouldn't question how Boeing engineers their jets, because I'm not a content expert in that. So, but it does help kind of gauge, public opinion on how things are moving.
Yeah. So we could just say like implement community assessments for continual feedback. Yeah,
that's good.
I'm a big fan of feedback in all areas because it lets you know what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong, and then you can fix it. Wait, that wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. Sorry. Okay. Next is streamline permitting process, collect necessary data from each department, permits, combine, develop standard metrics with knowledgeable agriculturalists with various fields, develop proper training programs to assess these standards, collate data, and distribute to other departments. So the develop proper training programs and develop standard metrics was to be able to kind of assess people across the board fairly with knowledgeable people, and then develop the training program so that you train the inspectors to be able to do that with those metrics. I think a lot of the issues were that depending on who was doing the assessment, they would have different varying degrees of how they would assess things or how they would view ag operations and things like that.
I think we had one similar to this earlier with the permitting. We were talking about that, but
we were talking about permitting with funding for the special funds, but we didn't have anything that we put down for streamlining permitting.
Okay, that's us hearing it.
Micah said he's got to run. Thank you. And then Nathan, were you waving your hand?
I was just saying bye to Micah.
Oh, sorry. So how do we feel about that language? Do we want to change it up, be more specific?
I like where it's going, the idea of streamlined permitting process.
So I know that there was a streamlined permitting process that the county didn't participate in for local EIA between the federal and the state levels. And those groups were having a really hard time that they had to navigate each department, each level separately and share all this information. And then, the departments wouldn't work with each other. So they had one idea at one level that wouldn't match up with the other, the ideas at the other level. So the federal and state government did this. They kind of took data from both of the applications, they put it into one, and they made it one process to go through. So I think, unfortunately, the county didn't participate in that, so they have to do that separately for the county, but that's kind of what we were thinking with this, but just within the county level for the different departments that are, because there's I think 4 departments that you have to go through for different types of ag permitting.
Water RPT planning. We've been trying to do something like this. Yeah, it's a great idea. And it's the same county. Why can't you just put it in one place and everybody can access that database, and it's one form. You don't have to go make copies and go to the next place and the next place. It's already there.
So do we want to change this language at all? Is it clear?
Knowledgeable agriculturalists.
From various fields?
Looks good. It's really close.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe develop proper training programs for inspectors to assess these standards. Be clear on that.
Okay, so are the inspectors, are they the knowledgeable agriculturalists with the various field experts?
I think they probably would not be the knowledgeable agriculturalists from various experts, because these would be people that the county is employing. So they would be people like from, like they do from RPT, they're anybody, but they would have to go through a training program to learn the standard metrics if they were going to be done, because we can't dictate who they hire. So having
get the ag inspectors into this Department of Ag, and RPT planning and water would be using them.
Yes, so, but besides I guess we could say hire people from various field experts to be assessed, like inspectors. But they're probably going to have a little bit harder time finding experts who want to do inspections. I think you could get similar results if you develop, metrics and create a training program so that it's across the board and they understand what those are. But we could take out the training program and just say that they need to hire knowledgeable agriculturalists from various fields.
You could put or train.
Okay.
Hire or train program inspectors. I think some people after retire might do that job for a couple of years. Might be fun.
Okay.
What's that word you used?
Which one?
Retire.
I'm not a quitter.
No, Teresa used the word retire. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm like,
That's when you put new tires on your vehicle.
Yeah.
Retire.
That's like my brother.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can just imagine all of the retired farmers lining up to do inspections. Let me go work at the county. I don't know. They probably want to run as far away as they can after they're done. Yeah.
No way. An agriculturalist, according to the great god Google, is in fact a person who cultivates the land and grows crops on it. So would it be develop standard metrics with knowledgeable agriculturists, or would it be farmers and ranchers? that part of the sentence gets a little cumbersome.
So maybe just with various field experts, and we can take out agriculturalists.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And then develop proper training program
For inspectors.
to assess these standards, collate data and distribute to other departments.
And assess needs another S in it.
Pat,
Thank you.
okay, how's that look?
So this is all about the inspector.
This is all about the streamlined permitting process.
And the inspector's going to go out and inspect and make sure that it is. I would also like the part of that definition there for the inspector to be an advocate for the farmers, to help make sure that they qualify. Something there that, you know, they're not there to police this business. They're there to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row and we have done everything properly, so we do qualify.
Okay.
They're to help us check off all the boxes.
Amen.
Okay, so is that good? Advocate for farmers? Okay. All right. Do we want to add anything or be good to move on?
Looks good. Thank you.
Okay. Now we've got develop metrics to measure reporting requirements, develop partnerships to collect necessary reporting metrics, create databases with ease of access to promote education and track process. I feel like we already covered this, but what do you guys think?
It feels a little bit redundant.
Yeah, I think with the first three, we're kind of covering all of that. But I'll bring it back down for you guys to read it again.
I think it's very familiar. I think it's covered.
Okay, I think so too. The question I forgot to ask was the streamlined permitting process. Do we want that at the end, or does that move up the chain of what research and development should address first?
Yeah, I think that should be one of the first things that gets sorted out.
Okay, do we want that at number 1?
2.
Number 2, so after the pipeline of resources, we want the streamlined permitting process.
Uh-huh.
Anybody? We good? Okay. Should be, I have to insert, so, yeah. Oh, nope, after, sorry. Okay, I think we got through infrastructure. Yay, sorry guys, this is taking, the wordsmithing part is the hardest part, you know, like, so I apologize. Okay, so we can jump into okay, invasive species.
Yay.
Okay, so we don't have that many actually. So we've got deer, we've got focus on management versus eradication at this point, ozone treatment, full assessment of current agricultural cross sectors with federal and state agencies, use this assessment to negotiate partnerships with the state to address shipping invasive species, land use, workforce development, food security, water use, and funding. That might go under research and development. Yeah. So that would be basically in invasive species, in shipping, there's cross sectors of land use and food security and water use and funding, basically, where this development is going to be crossing with the state. So I guess doing a full legal assessment of where those cross sectors are to negotiate partnerships or collaborations is what it sounds like. Do we
I think
want to
this
just,
is this is a big one. I mean, like going back to what Jerry was saying, at the port of entry is where we get hit really hard. And
Mhm.
I often find it kind of strange how hard it is for us to export things to somewhere, and how easy it is for people to ship things to us. So I think treatment at the port of entry is important. I also think maybe a little bit of teeth to maybe deny or, you know, require proof that these materials have gone through some treatment before they even got on the boat.
Mhm.
I mean, that's huge though. So I don't know how that gets done, but I think this is a really important point that we're addressing here.
Yeah, I think that's important too. And I think it's not just invasive species and shipping, it also includes the land use and water use. So I think a full legal assessment is needed, you know, by the county as they develop this. That might be one of the first things in research and development that they should do, honestly. Because as you're, you know, developing and trying to collaborate, the state's going to push back on a lot of things. You need to be able to know legally where you're able to begin your negotiation points at. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna set, do we want to have this for invasive species and shipping specifically and for the rest of the stuff in research and development, or do we just want to put it kind of to the top in research and development?
I think it should stay in invasive species.
Okay.
Because it's really trying to set up the framework for responsibility, which is something that's driving a lot of us crazy. You know,
Mhm.
So DLNR brought the deer over in the 60s, but they're not assuming responsibility for the outcome that we all have to deal with now that they're overrunning our farms and ranches.
Okay. Right. Do we want to change the language at all then? Or do we just want to leave that in there?
I wonder if you'd want to say to negotiate partnerships and responsibilities.
Do we want to include the state and federal government or just the state?
I would include the feds. I mean, DLNR is federal level, right?
DLNR is state.
That's state.
Uh-huh.
My mistake.
Okay.
It's a mess here too with the deer.
Yeah.
They bought a bunch of land, put up fencing, doing aerial hunts, and it's a hot mess. Very expensive.
Okay. So then we've got the deer, we've got the phone mobile traps, expansion of current slaughterhouses. And then need more staff, the cost of flying inspector on the hunt. And not enough staff to adhere to USDA requirements of the hunt and keep population down. So that is deer related too. So,
Or just get rid of some of the regulations. That would. It would make more sense to me, but
I
I don't
think-
know.
I'm
I don't
hoping if they do a full legal assessment and the responsibility of cost burdens are pointed out to the federal and state levels, maybe they might lower some of those regulations, you know?
I was gonna say, because a lot of that is like USDA and not Department of Ag, right? So when we start getting into slaughterhouse regulations, that we're, you know, it's taking the jurisdiction out of DoA into USDA. And so that's where that conversation goes to, definitely.
But you know, in some states like Wisconsin, Michigan, things like that, when if you have a ticket for hunting deer, they have what's called Hunt for the Hungry, and you can actually hunt deer. If you get one, you are supposed to clean it and field dress it as though you're going to take it home for your family. And depending upon the weather, you then stack some bags of ice into the body cavity and put a little GPS tag on it. And there's a phone app that you can actually register where it is. And then there's people that come and pick that up and take it into a slaughterhouse facility. We just simply don't have that common sense approach towards getting wild animal and invasive critters onto people's dinner tables yet.
I would agree with Jerry. I know here on Molokai, most of the population here have been eating wild deer for years and years and years. And I've yet to meet anybody that got sick from eating it. It's actually considered quite healthy.
I think the difference becomes when you're selling something versus giving away into your community. And so that's where, like, for example, our slaughterhouse on Molokai has that distinction where unfortunately they have to adhere to USDA regulations because they're looking at processing for not necessarily giving away to the community and food bank, food pantry use, but in terms of like selling. So I think it depends on where the end product is going when it comes to those types of things. I think those programs are great, but unfortunately those regulations are in place when it comes to commodities that are being sold through USDA.
But maybe Teresa can comment on this, but a lot of the ranchers that I know, they would be more than happy to simply donate all the critters. They're not looking for cost recovery. They just want them out of here.
Yes, we just want them out of here. You know, and since it's so many hoops to jump through to market it, you don't need an inspector to give it away as dog food or sell it as dog food.
You do if you're going to sell it as dog food. So there are regulations if you're making products out of deer or in any sort of species, wildlife species, and you're marketing it as a product that you're going to sell, it does have to go through a USDA facility still. There's a ton of regulations, unfortunately, around like invasive species. And so I'm just curious, like looking at what we have here and what the role of this department is and how that cross sectors into USDA. Because a lot of this is more USDA regulations. So where does this department come in terms of that conversation?
Yeah, it's too bad. We need to keep up with the Great 48 and relax our rules and be able to more easily get these deer on the table. And the dogs are eating like kings.
Totally agree. 100%.
So
It's
then
just not there yet.
yeah, it's not. After the full legal assessment, the next step, I mean, obviously is the priority is the deer, right? So do we want to have the department develop a plan focused on management versus eradication and then include these other things?
No, we don't want them to develop a plan.
Okay.
People with boots on the ground have developed the plan. We need them to get these rules relaxed and get us our own mobile slaughterhouse or get us able to do it. They need to straighten out the rules.
Okay, so work with existing community management plans? Or work to facilitate the action of existing community plans? How do we want to word that?
Greta Jerry.
Well, when you use the term community plans, it kind of conjures up something that the community has worked on, like the Lanai Community Plan or the West Maui Community Plan. But I think what you want is some of the mana'o that the state wildlife biologists have, you know, so that might be, you know, work with existing existing knowledge from, I don't know, the state wildlife biologists and because we know how many we have to get rid of every year and to keep it to status quo, and we're not even close to that yet.
I'm just shooting in the dark for it.
Oh, well, that looks great. I was wondering if you were typing that up or if it was like aliens that were just dropping that in.
No, so I'm trying to listen to what you guys said and then come up with language. So this is kind of what I got, and then we can go from there and add or delete. But I don't know if I was coming close. Let me wrap it. Sorry. How's that look? Are we getting close-ish? Effort. To reach sustainable harvest yields in order to minimize environmental degradation and crop damage, maybe?
Yeah, something like that's good.
Do we want to say agricultural crop damage or just agricultural destruction or?
I would say in order to minimize environmental and agricultural damage.
And then in infrastructure, we did specifically talk about mobile deer traps and co-op slaughterhouses as something to focus on in infrastructure. So do we want to include that again here?
You know, I think personally, you need the infrastructure to address any of this.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to me that it begins in the infrastructure and then the conversation continues. But it's got to start in the infrastructure. If you don't have the infrastructure, you can't begin the conversation.
Okay, so let's go back and look and see. So I know that we've got the slaughterhouses and the co-ops. Do we have the not enough staff to adhere? I guess that would be the legal assessment and management plan, but do we have anything in infrastructure? Oh, it's on the second tab, sorry. To address the need for USDA inspectors. Yes, including livestock inspection and testing, USDA compliant livestock inspection and testing. So would that be sufficient enough? I think you guys had mentioned something about feral animal and livestock were hard to group in together when we were talking about this. Does anybody remember that conversation? I just remember briefly hearing that, but don't remember what the outcome was.
Well, the feral animals that's a whole nother can of worms in terms of permitting versus permitting for domestic livestock. So I forget what the official term is for it, but it's more complicated. What is it? Exotic animal. I think that's what they call it. Exotic wildlife or exotic livestock, something like that. It's a whole different category compared to the run-of-the-mill cow or sheep or a goat.
Yeah, that's correct in terms of USDA. And when it comes to inspections, it's like a deer is considered exotic.
Okay.
Exotic wildlife. So it's a whole different process, a whole different plan for it.
So being that that is different, then we don't have anything in infrastructure. Do we want to add something in infrastructure to support countywide USDA compliance for exotic animal management or processing? What did you guys say?
Yeah, it's for processing exotic wildlife or something like that.
Processing exotic wildlife. I'm writing it down so I can type it in. And do we want that here or in infrastructure or in invasive species?
It definitely should be in infrastructure. I think Jamie's comment that you have to have the infrastructure before you can launch into any of the management strategies is right on.
Okay, so I'm going to, how do I do that? I think best way to do that, sorry. So I'm gonna scoot these down. And then type it here. Is that okay? So it'd be, do you want it before the livestock inspection or after? Does that want to be the primary focus? I'm just going to type it and then we can decide on placement. You guys can decide on placement. Placing, where would you guys like to put it?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Was it inspections or inspectors?
Inspectors, sorry.
We have spoken with Dr. Bell, and he's told us he will get us the inspectors, tell us how many we need when we're ready.
Okay. So if we're good, then we go back to sheet 1. Go back down to invasive species. So then we've got the deer covered, and then we have ozone treatment and begin communications with state and feds to decrease the introduction of invasives at the airports, ports, and retail location. So I think that would come after the legal assessment. And then we could combine ozone treatment, say begin communications with state and feds to decrease the introduction of invasive species at the ports, retail locations, including ozone treatment, maybe? Like put
Sure,
it
or
all in one?
including novel approaches towards management, e.g. ozone treatment. I think there's a fair bit of work that's been done on this, on the ozone already, and I know the copy guys were looking after it, so I'll see if we can dredge up something from the sands of time on that.
Yeah, I apologize. I've got to run off to a night job. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Keep it real.
Thank you. Hey, Jennifer, is there some place to put where people shipping need to treat their business there before they send it to us, and it needs to be treated when it lands here?
Treat their meat?
No, I'm talking about Christmas trees coming in.
Oh, trees. Sorry, I heard meat. I'm like, meat. Okay.
Sorry.
No. Manage a tree, i.e.
Yeah.
ozone treatments or
Pre and post shipping, both ends.
pre-shipping, pre and post shipping.
Yeah. When they ship and when it lands here, they gotta fumigate it somehow.
Yeah, you can't just knock the tree on the ground and hope that all the bugs fall out and then pack it away.
Okay. Is that
And-
okay? And that
and the-
is it. Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm teasing all the skunks that are coming in. If they won't give them to me, they can't be here.
Skunks? I don't
Yeah.
like skunks. I do like the smell of skunk.
I never smelt one yet.
There's ways to smell it without smelling a skunk. Okay. Begin communications with state and feds, federal, I should say federal government. To decrease the introduction of invasive species at the airport, ports, and retail locations, including novel approaches to management treatments, i.e. ozone treatment, pre and post shipping treatments. Is that okay?
Ready, Jerry?
Sure.
Anybody else? When?
Looks good.
Okay. All right. That's it's copied and added to this section. Okay, and then we are on education. There's not a lot in education. Do we want to stop here? Do we want to look at what we wrote in education in the areas of need to see if we're meeting those marks that we put in the original areas of need verbiage? So let's just
39D says relaxed harvesting rule. Did we put that somewhere?
relaxed harvesting rule. 39D. Oh, sorry, I didn't even see it because it's behind you guys' face. Sorry. Format. Okay. Oh, that is under invasive species then, yeah?
Yes, well, yes, up one, somewhere.
Okay, so then And do we want to say work with existing knowledge from the state wildlife and biologists to develop a management plan in conjunction with community efforts and relax harvesting rules to reach sustainable harvest yields?
Sure.
Is that too much to lump together, or is that?
It sounds like too much. What's above that? Is that the top one?
The full legal assessment.
Oh,
We could put it in here at the begin communications with the state and federal levels to decrease the introduction of invasive species and relax harvesting rules,
So when
or
we're-
separate. Sorry.
Are
go
we
ahead.
saying harvesting? Are we like, what are we referring to?
I think they're
specific-
talking deer.
So once again, yeah, so when we talk about that, I think that conversation really has to be like with this department, with USDA. Like the Department of Ag has no jurisdiction over that, as far as I understand, right? So in terms of like harvesting, and so just harvesting to process and distribute in community, I think that conversation, I want to make sure that we make sure we're inclusive of the language of like the legality of where we are with it. Like, I guess that's just my concern when we have this language, is that the Department of Ag has no jurisdiction over that.
Yeah, they don't have any jurisdiction, but I guess with a legal assessment, we would also see where we could find retribution if the federal and state government are not addressing those issues properly and it's creating damage. And that would be a point to negotiate.
I can see that. Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's just, I think this would be separate then.
Yeah, it would have to be separate.
Yeah, so where we begin communications to address invasives at the airport, this would be a separate one, begin communications with federal and state governments to begin like, I guess, relaxing harvesting rules. And then maybe that goes before then work with the existing knowledge from the state wildlife to do the management plans to meet sustainable harvest yields. What do you guys think? I'm just trying to think like in order so that we're doing that in order of a strategic plan, which makes the most sense logic wise and rule wise to have the most leverage to address these things with the federal and state levels. Because you don't just want to go to them and then say, oh, you've got no jurisdiction. Okay, well, if we have no jurisdiction and the management is completely on you, then if you are not addressing it properly and there's damages, can we then go to you for reparations for those damages? And they might go, well, that's where that legal assessment would take place to find out what leverage we have. And then,
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
and then I would say beginning negotiations and communications with the state and federal level to relax harvesting rules might go under that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Relax harvesting rules and also look at other states to see how they're doing it. And the Great 48's figured it out already. This is new to Hawaii, new to Maui County. The others aren't dealing with this. Some people are ready to start a class action suit.
Relax harvest rules and processes for and harvest rules and processing exotic wildlife. Does it need to say that too?
I'd say relax rules and regulations for harvesting of exotic wildlife.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
relax rules and regulations to what?
for the harvest of exotic wildlife.
For the harvest and consumption.
Yeah, I think, and that would come back to whether or not like harvest and consumption involves sales, right? So is it just harvest and consumption for personal use? Or are we talking about harvest and consumption for commercial sales?
My thought right there was to give it to the food bank, feed my sheep. To
I don't
give,
see why it can't be both. Can it be both if we're beginning communications and negotiations?
I think the bigger picture for me would be both, right? So if we're talking about an issue of like what we're dealing with on the scale of what we have, we need to start looking at more of a commercial use for them or an avenue.
Okay. So I can put in parentheses after this, personal and sales. Personal consumption and sales. So address both, or do we just leave it as is so it's everything?
I think if I look at that as from somebody that's reading it from a standpoint, I would read that as harvesting and consumption for personal use when I look at that language. I'm not sure what other people see when they see that, so.
Personal and market use?
I'm not aware. I mean, this would be for like hunted meat then, in that case?
Yes.
Say as a hunter, named hunter, I've never felt encumbered by those rules, by any such rules.
So in terms of, are you talking about in terms of if you hunt, like if you go out and you're hunting, and you want to then process and sell that meat commercially, you are under certain rules that you have to follow, and it has to be processed within a USDA permitted facility. Not if you're going to personally consume it, though.
Right, it would just be for market use, whether it's commercial or donated to a food bank.
Correct. And even with donated use with the food banks, we've tried to get it through our food banks and food pantries on Molokai. And we've had lots of liability issues that have come up with that. If it was run through a facility, like a USDA facility, our plant did not want to take on that liability of whether or not, like that's a lot of liability on them if we distributed meat that was processed in their facility. Now, if it's community members that are then processing meat and then just giving it out to individuals, that's different. But once it enters a USDA facility, there's a whole different level of liability that comes on and gets placed on that facility. So it gets kind of convoluted and complicated, and that's where those rules and restrictions could all be looked at and hopefully in the future be sort of relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. That's well put.
So with that in mind, how would we word that? Are we close with this? Jamie?
I mean, so in the terms of like slaughterhouse language, a lot of times they'll use the word like custom for personal, like custom slaughter is usually typically used for people who will bring in an animal for custom use, which means it'll go home. It's not for the market. And I'm only speaking for the slaughterhouse that I work with, right? So I don't know in terms of on Maui if it's different. So custom typically for us is like home use or home use consumption, and then commercial is typically deemed for something that's like our USDA stamped, USDA certified is typically a commercial sale.
I like commercial better than market.
Yeah. So and obviously super open to input on that. That's just my own that's my own experience with it.
our slaughterhouse here on Maui, custom means you're asking them for certain cuts a certain way. It's not their standard regular cut when they slice up your cow.
So, yeah, so custom doesn't equate like home use. Like you're gonna like have them process your cow for you to bring home and not for resale.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe a custom's not the right word. here it might be just come back to like home consumption, personal, that kind of thing.
What if you do custom / personal and commercial use?
Yeah.
Does that work?
Good, thank you.
Hey, I think we stop there. We'll stop there. It's 7:29. We did a full meeting this time. You guys are amazing and I'm sure drained. So thank you very much. I will put the ones we finalized into sheet 2. And then we've got a few more. Sorry, this is like a painful part of the process, but the strategic plan is going to be pretty key in making sure that they do the things that are going to make the most impact in the first 5 years. So it's going to give them really good direction. You guys are phenomenal as always. Thank you so much for your time and energy away from your families and all that. So I'll be on for a few after if anybody needs to talk. And have a great night. You guys are amazing. Love you.
So are you.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jen.